Hi everyone, this is Grayson with PERRLA. We recently did an office hours webinar and someone may have forgot to hit record. So today I'm going to go through a lot of the content that we were able to go through together in the office hours webinar, but record it this time. That way you guys can see it in case you missed the webinar. So today we're going to be looking at sort of three major things. One, we're going to be looking at the Google Chrome extension, how you can use it to create references and also capture some research while you're writing in PERRLA. Two, we're going to look at updated research notes and outline tabs inside of PERRLA Online, and we'll also take a quick look at how you can use your research notes inside of the PERRLA for Word add-in. We're also going to talk about customizing your PERRLA for Word papers. You may have big papers coming up this part of the semester, and we're going to look at a couple of ways that you can take and tweak the existing PERRLA templates for research papers to fit whatever it is that your professor is requiring. Now, we won't have a Q&A because this is a recording and not the live webinar like before. However, our support team is on the clock every day until 10 p.m. Central Time, and we would love to be able to help you by answering your questions. You can just shoot an email anytime to support@perrla.com. We usually respond within minutes, not hours or days like a lot of other companies, and we want to make sure that you're having the best experience with PERRLA and that you're writing the best paper possible so that you can get a good grade and go on to do whatever it is that you're actually trying to do with your life. Not write papers. So that's what we're going to cover. Let's take and dive in by starting to look at the Google Chrome extension. So in case you hadn't remembered or you haven't seen it, we released a Chrome extension for Google Chrome, obviously, earlier in the year, right back in January. And we have absolutely loved it and gotten a lot of really great feedback from it. So you can install it inside of Google Chrome, but there are a number of other browsers that you can also install the PERRLA extension into. The other big one being Microsoft Edge. Any browser that's based in Google Chromium, that includes things like Brave and Vivaldi and some other sort of more protective browsers, those will all support the Google Chrome extension. And inside of our help center at perrla.com/help, you'll be able to find, let's actually go there, a list of all the browsers and how to install them on those browsers individually. So if I come down here to the PERRLA Chrome browser extension, you'll see we have articles on how you can install the Chrome extension in things like Opera and Vivaldi and Chrome and Edge, Brave, Bliss, Epic, browsers I've never even heard of, but they're there and they all support the Chrome extension. So if you're using any of those, you'll be able to use this with your PERRLA account right at the same time. Now, once you install the Chrome extension, it's going to live up here in the little puzzle menu bar beside the URL bar at the top. This is for all of the extensions, sort of those puzzle pieces. What we can do, and what I've done in this one, is you can take and click the little thumbtack icon beside PERRLA in the list, and that's going to pin it to the bar. That way it's visible at any time. So this is really great so that I see that little PERRLA icon there. I can click it and it's going to open up the Google Chrome extension for me without having to go into the puzzle and then click it there. If you have a lot of other extensions or you just don't want it pinned to the top because you have a real minimalist aesthetic going on, that's totally fine. You can actually leave it unpinned and then just access it through the extensions icon in the toolbar. Now, for some of those browsers, this may be slightly different, but they should have instructions once you install the extension that pop up and show you exactly how to access the new PERRLA extension. All right, so let's look at how this thing works. Now, here I am inside of PERRLA Online, and the way that the PERRLA Chrome extension works is it allows you to create references that get added to your reference library as you are surfing the web or as you're doing your research. So you have a professor who gives you an assignment, and they say, hey, you need to be writing about Bigfoot, or about cryptids like the Loch Ness Monster. Well, while you're doing your research, sort of searching the web, looking at journal articles or news sites, or online books even, opinion pieces, videos, while you're looking for all those things, you can take and create references in the PERRLA reference library for those pages that you're looking at. And then when you go to create your paper, that reference is already built and waiting for you in your PERRLA reference library. You're not going to have to go and recreate it a second time or try to write down the DOI and then keep up with it later on while you're writing. You can do it while you're doing your research and then find it inside the library. So here I am. I've got an article here on NPR about how monster hunters were looking for the Loch Ness Monster, the biggest search in 50 years. This was actually just a couple months ago. They were doing a full sweep of all of Loch Ness and had a couple, I think it was over 100 boats that were involved, oddly. I don't think they had any conclusive results, unfortunately. But I want to cite this article in my paper that I'm writing. So I can come to the PERRLA extension icon. It's going to open up for me. And then I'm just going to say, create a new reference right at the top. Now, this is going to look very similar to how you create a reference inside of PERRLA already. But instead of pulling in a URL or a DOI, I'm going to use the button below the search bar that says Use Current Page. It's going to take and it's going to look at the current page and it's going to see if it can find a DOI. If it can, it's going to look for that DOI's information because that is the most accurate way to find information for any kind of reference. If it can't, then it's going to take and pull the URL and try to process the page as a website. Here I can see that we don't have a DOI, obviously. It's an NPR article. And so it's processing that as a website. And it's going to try to pull some of the metadata that NPR provides in the background behind the page to fill out our reference form for us. So we've got Dustin Jones, our author. Here, our page title, Monster Hunters are conducting the largest search of Loch Ness. I need to make sure that this is capitalized correctly. Loch Ness is a proper noun. There's no translated page. We've got the website name, we've got the publication date, and we have the URL right here. Now, we don't have a retrieval date because this is not an article that is likely to change quickly. Something like Wikipedia or something like that changes a lot, so we don't have to put a retrieval date. Here we can see our live preview, and this looks fantastic. So I'm going to say next, and then here I'm going to just say create. That's it. You can see PERRLA has actually created the Jones reference here and added it into our reference library. So if I come back to PERRLA Online and I come over to my references, we're actually going to find that Jones article right here at the top of the list that I created today. If I were to take and go into one of my papers, for instance, let's take and actually create a new paper that we'll be working with. So let's say Sasquatch, the Truth Revealed, our good old standby, and we'll say that this is going to be due today. Create that research paper. When PERRLA builds the research paper, it's going to open with our reference library. I can take and say add reference from library, and right there's our Jones reference waiting for us. I can just add it to my paper just like that, and PERRLA has that pulled right in. So that's pretty quick and easy with one reference, but you can see if you've got a bigger paper and you're doing 10, 15, 20, 30 references, being able to take and create those references while you're finding them, instead of having to hold on to them and come back later on to recreate them when you're in the middle of writing your paper, can be really helpful and save you a lot of time. I cannot tell you how many times I have taken and written something down thinking, oh, this will totally make sense later on. And then when I get to later on, I'm like, this is absolute chicken scratch. I have no idea what it is I was writing or where this was, or I accidentally wrote down one of the numbers wrong and I can't find that URL. It's very frustrating. And when you're trying to write a paper, you don't need that frustration. So using the Chrome extension, I can create that reference while I'm writing and then have it available for me in the future. And I know that it's all correct. One of the other things that's really cool about the Chrome extension is that we can actually take and pull in research from the pages that we're looking at, and we can add it to the reference that we've created. So for instance, in this NPR article, I'm going to open up the Chrome extension. I'm going to come over here to Research Notes on the left in the navigation bar. Now this is going to look very similar to the reference that we just created. Actually, I'm going to come over here first. There's two ways you can do this. You can either go into Research Notes on the left-hand side, or you can actually come over and you can create research notes directly from inside the reference library as well. So let's say I'm on this article and I really like this quote right here, this sentence. I want to be able to use this sentence in my paper, and so I want to keep it. Now, traditionally, I probably would have created a index card. I would have written down this sentence on the index card. I would have put the page number. I would have put a reference to the reference it came from. So I'd probably put like NPR, Dustin Jones, in the top corner. And then I'd have a whole stack of these index cards that I would be sorting through or keeping up with. A little more modern approach is I may copy this and paste it into another Word document. Something that I keep on the side while I'm writing my paper that has just a whole bunch of quotes in it. Well, with the Chrome extension, we can actually manage that directly and keep that research, that quote, that text for you inside of your reference library. So all we're going to do is we're going to highlight the content that we want to keep about the Loch Ness Center. I'm going to come in here to PERRLA, and let's say I do it just from right here. I'm going to click the little more icon, and I'm going to add a research note. It's going to take me into this reference. It's going to open up that reference's research notes, and then it's going to take and pull the text that I had highlighted on the page, put it into the text field where I can create a new research note for me automatically, and it's even going to add the double quotes around it because I'm copying this text directly from the page. It's going to be a quotation. That doesn't mean I have to use it as a quotation when I get into my paper. I can paraphrase this at that point, but it's just a good idea that when you're pulling information out of a reference, that you try to keep it in the format that it is. I've taken before and paraphrased something into my notes, and then when I go to put it into my paper, I paraphrase it again, and I end up unparaphrasing it back to what it was, or pretty close to what it was originally, in which case I should have done it as a quote. So if you do it as a quote, you keep up with it as a quote, until you get to the point of adding to your paper, you know that you're not going to paraphrase it back to where it started at, if that makes sense. All right, all that's to say, I've got the reference here inside of the PERRLA extension, and it's inside the text field, so I'm just going to press enter. That's it. It's going to add that as a research note into my paper, and I can take and I can go ahead and I'm going to add a citation for that note because it's a quote. So it's come from Jones, and we don't have a page number. Let's add a couple more. Let's actually add this one here that actually has quotation marks in it. So let's take, we're going to open up the Pro extension again. I'm going to add a research note. One of the really cool things that the Chrome extension does is it can see those double quotes inside of there. And so it's going to take and add the double quotes around the entire thing and replace the double quotes on the inside with a single quote, like you would need when you're adding it to your paper. So that looks great, and let's go ahead and add that citation at the same time. And we'll do just a couple more of these. We'll copy this in as a research note as well. We'll add that citation right there, and then let's pull, this is a good one, 22 square miles, a depth of 788 feet. That's a great quote right there. And let's see if I can right there. Copy that. And we'll add that as a research note right there. Perfect. You can see we'll add our citation as one last step. Great. So now we've got just a couple notes. So this is an article that actually was pretty helpful for me. I got a number of things that I want to pull and use inside of my paper here for the Jones reference. So now let's go back into PERRLA Online. I need to open that paper. I closed it by accident. Now we're going to start off in the reference and citations panel right on the side, but let's add some of that research that we found. So inside of the toolbar up here across the top, we have an icon for research notes. Right there we can see I've got the Jones article. I can click show research notes, and it's going to show me all the research notes that we created. Like, these are the things that we just made just a second ago using the Chrome extension. Now let's say that I want to add in this wonderful fact that we found right here, 22 square miles. I can click the plus icon right there. It's going to add that text directly into my paper, and it's going to pre-generate that citation for me. Now I need to take and make sure, tweak that punctuation to make sure the punctuation is correct, that it's added in there for me, and that's it. It's marked this green because I've used it already inside the paper. I can mark it unused or used at any point, but that's the way that you can use your research notes. So I can take and I can pull, I can either add the plus icon or I can drag and drop it in just like that. Isn't that cool? Now, this is just a quick look at how you can use this for one reference. But if you have dozens of references in your paper, you may have multiple that are in here where they each have their own research notes, and you can be pulling those in one at a time. Now, one of the great things here, let me save those changes, is we can also use this inside of the outline tab. Here, we have access to those research notes inside of the outline, just like we do inside of the editor. So while I'm putting my outline together, I can take and organize all the research that I've found and add it into my outline. And then once I've built my outline inside of the editor, I can come to the outline panel and drop that in along with the research as well, in case you don't want to write an outline, all sorts of things. So those are research notes. Now, if you have a number of things in here, you may say, oh, I can't find that one research note that I was looking for. It was something about 22 square miles. Well, as you type the inside of the search, it's going to search through all of your references that are added to the paper and all the research notes that they have, and it's going to come back and show you the results for that. So if we have a really powerful search feature in here, so observe, like for instance, Loch Ness. Now all of these are going to have Loch Ness in it, so you can see there. But what if it was something about observation? Okay, there we go, observe. I can see this is the note I was looking for. I can say, oh yeah, I've already used that already, or I want to drop it into my paper. Cool, so that's how you create research notes inside of the Google Chrome extension. Now, I do want to show you that you can actually do this exact same thing inside of the Microsoft Word add-in now. You now have access to your research notes inside of Word, which is really awesome. So here I've just got another paper, very similar paper to what we had. Let's start off by going to the research notes panel. Now, I have not actually added any references to this paper yet, and so I don't have any research notes to show for the references that I've added to the paper. So the first thing we need to do is add the reference we just created to our paper. So I'm going to say add reference from library, sort by date created. Here's that Jones reference. We're going to create it. It's going to add it to the paper. I can see it here down in the references section that it created. Now I can go to research notes, and it's going to say, oh, you do have one reference in here. And I can say show research notes, and here I have those research notes inside of inside the side panel. Now, I can't drag and drop these over because Microsoft Word doesn't give us that kind of level of control. However, I can place my cursor where I want that citation to appear. For instance, right here, I can say plus, click the plus icon right beside it. It's going to add that text, and then it's going to build the citation at the end of it, just like it does inside of PERRLA Online. I'm going to adjust the punctuation mark there at the end of the sentence, and you can see it turns green here as well. So you can use the Google Chrome extension as sort of a building block for making references and documenting your research, whether you're using PERRLA for Word or if you're using PERRLA Online. So it makes it a really great companion piece to our core applications in Word and PERRLA Online that we think is really going to make things great. The last really nice thing about this is that your research notes are available in any paper where you add that reference. So any paper where I add this Jones reference to the paper, whether it's now or in 2 semesters or in a couple years, all of the research notes that I created at any point are going to be available in that upcoming paper. So if I've got an article or a text that I'm using a fair bit in school that I'm using over and over, maybe even through the course of a class, all those things that I thought were important are going to be available to me in every single paper that I write. So I can always go back and easily search and find anything that I really thought stood out, was worthwhile. And this is really helpful, especially as you get to those big papers at the end of the semester or at the end of your program, like a capstone. You can take and see, here's all the research that I've built, the things that I've said were important that I've used. You get kind of a nice big picture that you can pull from of highlights that are useful and possibly worth integrating into that final document. So there we go. That's using the Google Chrome extension to build references and create research notes. Now, let's take a look at the Research Notes and Outline tab in PERRLA Online. We actually got to look at this for just a second in our last point. So here I am back inside of PERRLA Online, inside of our paper. I'm going to go to, you can see that we've split out. So we used to have the Overview, the Organize, and then the Editor tab and Export Print. We've split that Organize tab into 2 separate tabs. So now you have Overview research, outline, editor, export, print. And this really is a better way of sort of thinking about what that process is, and how you go through the process of writing a paper. We have overview. This is our information about when it's due. It gives us access also to our recent paper saves, what we have when we created the paper, all of the versions that we may have created in the past. So if for some reason I did something really dumb, right? My cat walked over the computer and it deleted half of the body of the paper, and it hit save at the same time, and then it also laid down and closed the window. Well, that sounds like a catastrophe, but it is not, unfortunately, unreasonable. As someone who lives with 2 cats, we have versions, access to all of the previous paper versions. So every time that you've ever hit save in the last 30 days, we have access to those versions, and you can download them as a PDF, you can download them as a Word file, or you can revert your paper back to one of those versions here in the Overview tab. The Research tab, this is where you're going to be able to see and create additional research notes for references. So for instance, right now, we only have that one Jones article added to our paper. So let's take and let's add one more. This is a journal article by Mike Tuggle. Let's take and create a new, back to all references. And we're going to do this here. Create a new reference, use the current page. It's a journal article because it found that DOI up here in the URL. It's a single journal article by Mike Tuggle, Sasquatch and Psychological Perspectives. Here's all of our great information. And you know what? For this one, I'm going to put a retrieval date of today. That way I use this article a lot, so that way I can make sure I know which one this is. Perfect. All right, there's our Mike Tuggle reference. So if I come back into my paper, I'm going to refresh. That way it resyncs all of my library. I'm going to come into Research Note. I can add a reference from my library. Ooh, that's a weirdness. But I'm going to add that Tuggle reference. I don't know what that's doing. That's odd. Tuggle reference, and now I have the Tuggle reference available here inside of my paper. Now, I could take, and we could create research notes here inside of the paper using the Chrome extension like we saw a second ago. But I'm going to show you that you can also create research notes here inside of the Research tab. So we can see here's the notes that we created earlier. But let's say that we have just the article in paper. We have a printout that our professor gave us. Whoa, that's old school, right? Actual pen and paper. Getting something like that. So we need to get that into our document. We've got some things that we really want to pull from this article. So we can add research notes manually. So we could say Sasquatch is real, right? I can press enter and it's going to create that research note for me. Here, when I hover over it, I can add that citation. So let's say that's page number 4. You can ignore this little bit there. I can see that because I have developer access here. That's for troubleshooting things. I can see I've got a citation for page 4. All right, let's add another research note. And let's say this Tuggle's introductory points are useful for displaying how to use scientific data. So this isn't a quote that I'm pulling. It's just an observation that I have. It's a note that I want to write down about this. And then I want to follow this up with another note. So I can press, I believe it's Shift and Enter at the same time on my keyboard. So I can hold down Shift and then click Enter. And it's going to create that research note and automatically open up a new research note where we can type the quote that we were talking about. So any data must be peer reviewed and have significant backing to overturn the decades of skepticism about Bigfoot. There we go. And then I can press enter and it's going to create Then I can press enter and it's going to create that note for me. Now here I need to add another page number. Say this is page 12. create that citation. And this one, because it's just my ideas or my thoughts, it doesn't actually have a citation with it. So here I can see all of the research notes that we've created, whether they were created inside of the Google Chrome extension or whether I created them here inside of PERRLA Online. I can also create new references, right? So if I need to add a reference to make, I don't have it in my library yet, I can create it and then add notes to it. We saw that we can add notes from our library. We can sort our notes, so we can do these by created date, newest to oldest, or their citation by their location, so first to last inside of a work. So if I do this citation first to last, if we look here, it's going to sort these by page number of 4 and then 12. And because this one doesn't have a page number, it gets tucked way down at the end. I can also search through the research notes here inside of the paper. So if I have a number of these, I can search for those. So 22 or observe or Bigfoot, Loch Ness. I can search through all of those, and it's going to be a pretty snappy, quick search. So I can find those notes and see if I have them or adjust them, edit a citation, things like that. So you can also edit any of these. So if you see, like, you can click into any one of these and press enter to save the changes, or 75 for that. Or I can take, and if I don't want to save the change, I can press the escape button on my keyboard, and that's going to clear out without applying the changes that I did. There we go. That is the research notes tab. Okay, the research tab inside of PERRLA Online. Now let's go over into our outline. Like we saw before, the outline gives us is a place, it's kind of like a separate editor where we can take and organize the research or ideas that we've already created or have planned, so that we can kind of create that skeleton for our paper and the way that things are going to fit together, the way that we want to sort of approach writing. An outline is an amazing, amazing tool, and I cannot recommend outlines enough to anyone who has to write a paper. I mean, if you're going to have to put together a argument, right, that has a thesis, a main point that then you support with other ideas and with evidence, and that argument is going to be graded by a professor who is reading lots and lots of arguments, or by a TA who's going through a lot of these, making sure that what you're writing fits together well, and that you're supporting what you're saying, and that you're actually addressing the things that your professor wants you to address, right, is critical. A lot of professors even take and they give a sort of a rubric, like, hey, in your papers, you have to come up with an argument, and you've got to do X, Y, and Z in this paper. Like, you have to cover these 3 things in your paper. An outline is an amazing way to make sure that you're actually talking about X, Y, and Z in your paper, and that you're not just writing and then suddenly you realize after you're on page 5 and it's a 4-page paper, I haven't addressed 2 of the 3 things. It can save you a lot of heartache. It can make writing a lot simpler, and it's just a great, great practice. So that's what the outline editor allows you to do. It allows you to create an outline. So let's take and start our outline. So we can just say introduction. Let's create just a couple things here. Point 1, point 2, point 3, conclusion. Write basic 5-paragraph essay. If you have no idea what you're doing, this is a great place to start. Say, I'm going to argue this because of 1, 2, and 3. Then you talk about 1, then you talk about 2, then you talk about 3. And in the conclusion, you said, I argued this, and it was supported by points 1, 2, and 3. That's the 5-paragraph essay. Super basic, easy way to get into any paper. It doesn't have to be 5. 5 is just common. It's great to have 5. You may have, 4 or 5 points that you want to support, but that's fine. This is a great intro that we can put here. So in our introduction, we're going to have a thesis, right? Maybe we have a little anecdote at the beginning. So I'm going to say there's a little anecdote there that kind of gets our readers' attention. Let's say I'm going to press enter, right? So I'm pressing enter to go to a new line, just like this. I'm going to save that. And then I can use the tab button on my keyboard. If I press tab, it's going to indent me in 1. If I hold shift and press tab, it indents out 1. So I can come all the way back to 2. I can indent in 1 level further than I currently am. I can also use these buttons here inside the toolbar to decrease or increase our indent, right? Let's say Bigfoot is real because we have physical evidence, a history of reliable sightings, and the ecological niche exists for a large primate. So there we go. We have our thesis, Bigfoot is real, and then I'm supporting that with 3 points. We have physical evidence, history of reliable sightings, and there is an ecological niche for such primates. So point 1 may be physical evidence. Point 2, history of sightings. And point 3, ecological niche. Physical. There we go. Niche. Great. All right, so let's start putting some of the research that we collected into our outline. So I'm going to open up the research notes panel from the top toolbar up here. And we're going to actually use mostly this Tuggle reference because the Loch Ness reference isn't really about Bigfoot. We may throw one in there anyways. So I can show my research notes here. Now let's add a subpoint, right, to this. So I'm going to place my cursor here. I'm going to press, I was pressing the wrong side of the thing. Enter on my keyboard. That's going to make a new line. And then I'm going to press Tab, or I'm going to click the increase indent here. So it's a subpoint. Now, just like we would do inside of our paper, I can click and drag this into the paper, or I can press the plus icon here to the right. Perfect. So I can see that's going to add the text that I've got. I'm going to go ahead and update that punctuation so it's updated for me later on. Much of the physical data is processed by accredited labs. Okay, we're going to say that by accredited labs. So here I have got point 1. I have a quote in here, and then I've got just some of my own text in here as well. Let's save that. We'll say that's good enough. You got one of everything. But you can continue to work on this, right? As you can see, you could take and build out your entire outline. Now, some people like a really complex outline that really goes into a lot of depth. One of the nice things about that is that essentially when it comes to writing your paper, you're just going to take and sort of convert every point in the outline into a sentence. So it really is sort of just a one-to-one. I mean, that kind of detail in an outline. Some people don't like to have that much detail. They just want to have a big sort of blueprint. And so they may only go like 1 level deep in their thing. They say, okay, these are the 5 major big sections of my paper, and then I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about this. And then maybe they put underneath that, right, a bunch of their research notes. You can sort those in together. So let's actually add one of the Tuggle ones here. There we go. So we've got Jones. Perfect. All right. So I may say, like, I'm only going to talk about physical evidence. I'm really not going to go into a lot of depth in my outline here, but I know that I want to use this quote and this quote and this quote in this section. And so I can take and go ahead and put those in to the outline. All right. I'm going to save that. I press just Control S or Command S on the keyboard, or I can save my outline anytime. It does autosave automatically. And then let's go back over into the editor over here. All right. So now that I'm inside of the editor, let's say I want to take and I actually want to use that outline that we had built. So I'm going to come and I'm going to open the outline panel inside of the ribbon bar. Here, the outline gets converted into cards, into blocks. So every single line item that's inside of the outline panel gets converted over into a block. Right? And just like our research notes, we can take and click and drag these into the body, or we can take and use the plus icon to move them into the text wherever our cursor is. We also have an option here to insert the entire outline. So if you do have, you don't want to work from the side panel, you just want to take and put the entire outline into the body of the paper, go ahead and create all those citations that are in there and have everything just work there inside in the body. You can do that. Clicking insert entire outline is going to insert each of these items as text into your paper. It's not the way I like to work. It's a little messier, but I absolutely know students who do love to work that way. That's totally fine. So let's take and let's say, hey, this is going to be point. Let's take that point 2, right? Or let's add our thesis here at the beginning of our paper. So I can add that there at the beginning of our paper. You can see it's adding that text right there automatically, and it's marking it as green, meaning I have used this. So I've used that whole point, so I can check that off as done. Introduction, anecdote, thesis, right there. Perfect. All right, let's go into our first major point about the physical evidence. We're going to add this first, great, and then we're going to add our quote right here. Excellent. It's going to take and it's going to add, right, the first one that we added, and then it automatically is going to add the second one and build that citation into the paper for us without a problem. I can also take, let's say, all right, let's follow that up with the Jones article there. Excellent. This is looking really good. Now, let's say that, you know what, I actually want to use that that quote there a second time later on, right? It's really great. It made a lot of sense in that first point, but now I'm getting to the second point, and actually it makes sense there again as well. Well, that's fine. I can take and just reuse that as many times as I want. Every time I drag it, it's going to create a new citation for it in the paper, and it's going to re-add that text automatically. So that is the research notes and outline tabs inside of PERRLA Online. You can take and create or view or add to the research that you've done, that you have for each of the references that you've added to your paper. So you can see the notes that you may have created with the Google Chrome extension, or if it's one where you don't have access to the Chrome extension, you can take and add those notes manually here inside of the research notes panel. In the outline, you can take and you can organize the text of your paper. You can sort of put together a game plan for how you want to form your argument and how you want to sort of stitch together all the different research bits that you have. Now, finally, when I come into the editor, I'm going to have access to the content that I've created inside of the Research Notes tab, here inside the Research Notes panel, or the Outline tab here in the Outline panel, so that I can pull that into the body of my paper. Very cool. That is the Research Notes and Outline tab inside of PERRLA Online. All right, next up, we're going to look at customizing our research papers, and we're just going to touch on this one lightly. This is a really big topic, and we actually have a totally separate webinar called PERRLA 201. It is on our YouTube page. I'll put a link to it in the description of this video on YouTube so that you can watch that. And it's really a deep dive. I mean, it's over an hour long, but it goes into a lot of detail on what you need to know when it comes to writing advanced papers like dissertations or theses or papers where you're having to manually adjust from the default APA template. Whether it's because that's what your professor wants, whether it's because you've got custom content that you want to be adding in as part of your own research, or it's just a really long paper that has additional sections. That's a really great in-depth webinar that you can dive into and you can watch, and I recommend it to anybody before they start writing those big papers, because knowing just a couple things up front about how PERRLA works inside of a paper and what you can do to sort of make sure that PERRLA is giving you the best paper and document possible, it can really help set you up for success and avoid sort of the last minute frustration. The editing of a document, that final process of making sure that everything is sort of pulled together and tight in a dissertation or a thesis or a long paper, that can be some of the most frustrating work. And so by knowing what's coming up ahead of time down the road, at the beginning, you can make sure that you're saving yourself a lot of stress at the end by setting up just one or two things that are really simple at the beginning. Okay, that's my aside and my plug for the PERRLA 201 webinar. Let's go over into Microsoft Word here, and let's take a look at a couple of the things that may be useful to know when it comes to customizing your text. One of the first things when you're working inside of Word, when you're needing to do something custom to the default template, always come to the Home Ribbon tab and turn on the hidden characters. It's called the Show Hide Characters button. It looks kind of like a backwards P, And it's over by the styles pane about halfway through. And what it does is when you click this, it's going to show you all of those invisible characters and formatting marks that Microsoft Word is using to lay out and structure your paper, but that don't actually show up. And these are things that are incredibly, incredibly important. Knowing where things like page breaks are, how many paragraph lines you have, how many spaces you're working with. Is there a section break that you're up against? When you're trying to format and adjust the layout of things, being able to see those invisible markers that are really dictating the structure of the paper will make your life so much easier. So always turn on invisible characters when you're having to do something custom. That's going to be the first thing right out of the gate. The next thing we talked about are content controls. If you're using Microsoft Word, you're very familiar with our content controls and the way those work. They're the boxes that show up around text, and those boxes have locked content in them because the content inside those boxes has to be formatted in a very specific way for the APA. And you can't type inside of those. You can't adjust. So it's locked content controls. That allows us to do two things. One, it allows us to know where that content is inside of your paper. So things like citations are inside content controls, because if you have a reference that's a group author with an acronym, we've got to make sure that the first time you use that reference as a citation, you're providing the full name of the author, and that each of the subsequent times you have the acronym only. Content controls allow us to know where that content is, and then they're locked down because that's part of how Word works, but it also means that you're not going to be shooting yourself in the foot by accidentally changing something that has to be formatted in a very specific way that we're formatting for you for the APA or MLA formats. So in the title page, right, you've got a couple of these content controls around specific pieces of information. That's totally fine. We can take and actually move and customize these things around, just like we can move citations around inside the body of our paper. But by turning on the hidden paragraphs, we're able to better see what the layout of this paper actually is. So as you can see, we've got a couple of empty lines, 3 empty lines here like the APA suggests. We have our title in bold, an empty line, and then our subsequent additional title page information. We then have a section break here at the bottom of the page that's going to break our title page section from the body. And we use a section break inside of here because the first title page can be slightly different than the body section. And so we need to make sure that we're separating those sections out. So we know that when PERRLA is going through and looking at the paper, like, hey, this section of the paper, this is the title page stuff. This section of the paper, that's the body. And then this section of the paper, that's actually where your references live. So we can handle those appropriately. All right, let's say I need to add in a code of conduct, right? I need to put in a statement saying that I was not using ChatGPT, or if I was giving the proper citation for it, and that I did the work myself when writing this paper. So what I can do is I'm going to come here, I'm going to place my cursor at the end, and because it's a content control, I'm going to use the right arrow key to get outside of that content control, right? And I'm going to add in 2 paragraph breaks right there. So I just press enter twice, and here's where I have my code of conduct. I hereby declare that I wrote this paper myself without the uncredited aid of any other persons or tools. Right? So I put that in there. That's great. That's what I need to put in there. But my school wants this to be bold, and then it also wants all of this to be left aligned. Not a problem. I can customize that. The nice thing about this is that these content controls here inside of PERRLA, if I go to the title page panel, let's say that I actually need to add in, let's say this is the truth uncovered. I can make those updates, and PERRLA is still able to function and add and adjust all of those content controls without a problem. Dr. Sparkles, we're going to add that in underneath the date. Yeah, right there, right between the date and our course information. So there we go. I can actually take, let's say I need this code of conduct actually to go here, and then I need those dates to go underneath. That's just what my school wants. It's a little weird, but it's what they want. Because those content controls are still here, that's not a problem at all. Let's say this is actually the 5th. I can do that. PERRLA is going to be able to find that content control and continue to update it like it should. Okay. Let's talk about section breaks. Like I mentioned a second ago, section breaks are really incredible tools in being able to break up a paper and know which part of the paper is which. Section breaks are especially useful even if you're having to add in like a landscape page into the middle of your paper, right? That's really helpful if you have a big table. You need to be able to do section breaks around it so that you can set that one page in the middle horizontal. There's a walkthrough of how we do that inside the 201 webinar, by the way. You can find that there. But these section breaks are really important for PERRLA to be able to function properly so that when we take and we say, hey, we're going to add a new reference, right, to our paper, that section break that happens between the body and the reference section itself is critical for us being able to identify where those references are and being able to add those references in the correct order. Right? So if I were to take and delete out that section break there, this is going to actually break the paper as I try to add references in. So leaving those section breaks in place and turning on those hidden characters so that we're able to identify them is really important. But let's say that I do actually need to add in another page at the end of the body, right? It's just a section that we're going to put in an image. It's not an appendix. Appendices go after the references, and PERRLA handles appendices for you, right? This is just something extra that my school wants. So I can take and I can insert a blank page, a page break right here. And then I can take and I can say, let's customize. This is going to be a custom section, right? And it's going to have one paragraph in it. Okay, so let's take and let's say, this actually, but this needs to be a heading 1 because it's a new section right there. So I can set that to a heading 1, and now I have a new section here. Now, because I have that section break and it's still there and it's in place and I've not sort of affected the layout of the references down here, I can continue to add references from my library. They're going to be added in the correct spot. See, right there for Tuggle. Perfect. But I know that is happening because I turned on those hidden characters, right? If I had not turned on those hidden characters, I wouldn't know that that section break is there, and I may take and add in a bunch of paragraph lines. I may add in a page break or a new section break, and it may jump on one side or the other of that section break, and sort of do weird stuff. I mean, all sorts of weird stuff can happen when you're working in something that's invisible. So by turning those on, it's really a great tool. And those are sort of the two things that I really wanted to point out in this. One, content controls are part of how PERRLA identifies areas, and leaving them in place is really helpful. Until you get, unless you're at the very end of your thing, and if you can create a clean copy, right, which removes all the content controls from the paper. But being able to see and identify the invisible formatting structure of your paper by turning on show hide makes it a lot easier to work with every single part of the paper when it comes to doing custom content, and making sure you're leaving in those content controls as much as possible, and that you're leaving those section breaks in place also as much as possible. Those are two really critical things that help PERRLA work correctly and be able to identify the parts of your paper correctly, and give you the ability to customize your paper in the way that you need to. There's a lot of stuff that you can do inside the constraints of sort of how PERRLA works. I mean, you can create all sorts of weird things with your document and your paper. But those are two things I really wanted to highlight. All right, you guys, that's it for the three things that we want to talk about. If you ever have a question, like I mentioned at the beginning, please do not hesitate to reach out to our support team. They are awesome. They work every day until 10 p.m. Let's go back over to support.perrla.com, or actually perrla.com/help. That's where we want to go. This is our help center. You can find articles here anytime, but our support team is amazing. We want to be able to help you. You can reach out to them by emailing them at support@perrla.com. You can also contact them at the bottom of every single one of these articles. There is a link that you can use, a form at the bottom to reach out to us, as well as searching our articles or reaching out to us through the help widget in the bottom right-hand corner. Okay? We want to make sure that you're doing your best, you're having a great time using PERRLA, or as great of a time as you can while you're writing papers, and that you're successfully sort of getting through your classes so that you can get to that next step in life outside of school. Thank you guys so much for watching. It has been a pleasure. I hope this is all right. I'll make sure that I remember to hit that record button next time. And as always, we're here if you need us. Good luck and good writing.